Throughout this series of talks about e-commerce, we've often talked about the need and the disruptive element of it, and the desire of getting consumers getting into the supply chain, talking to various areas, marketing both ways, and markets not just from business to consumer, but actually from consumer to business, and the consumer, although the end of the supply chain and the supplier of all value, is no longer just at the end of the supply chain. They can reach and talk into all sections of the supply chain or the value chain, whichever way you want to talk about and look at it. And it's all very important. And we've also talked in some cases, we've touched on the issue of security, etc. But in this particular short talk, I think we're going to look specifically at what do we mean by secure e-commerce environment. And the reason I want to talk about this specifically is that there is one way of looking at it, which is quite common, which I believe needs to be challenged. We need to look at it in perhaps a slightly different way. And the key to it is thinking of it as an environment. You think of a lot of small companies swimming around as being an ecosystem, which we had in the travel industry, where there's huge numbers of small suppliers being brought to the e-commerce environment. What we're looking at is how do we actually deal with that? And one of the key things there, so first let's look at what are the risks. Now, it's often seen that the risks fall into four phases of the e-commerce deal. The first phase of any e-commerce deal is information, where you go out and find out what you want to buy, give information about yourself, you receive and give information, do that. There's then the negotiation phase between the buyer and the seller. After the negotiation phase, there comes the payment phase, which is the one that most people see as being the risk, but actually is quite a small part of it. There's specific risks there, and these can be devastating for people to know about it. And then the risks around the delivery phase, or on e-commerce, of course, you haven't actually see the product straight up front, so you're waiting to see when it comes through. And these are quite common. More than one academic, more than one set of publications that has talked about these particular phases. So it's a well-known model within the area. And what do we mean in each phase? Well, in the information phase, there's the issue of confidentiality. There's the fact that you want to make sure that any information you give over is protected and is not shared with people you don't want it shared with, and that you are not actually giving them information that can then later on be used against you. So confidentiality is key. There's also access control. Who can access your information? You don't all and sundry to get it. You want to be limited to those who need to know it. And you also want to make sure that can you trust the people to look after your information, but can you also trust their technology? And the integrity checks on their area of their information to make sure that it stays there? Can you trust their integrity? Make sure they're telling you the truth, and of course for them, can they trust your integrity? Having gone through the information phase, if you find out what you want to know and you've shared information with them, and you decide to go over purchase, that then becomes a negotiation phase. For that, you need to know, can you have a secure contract with someone you've never met and might actually there may be no actual human being involved in the process of you buying of them and purchasing the exchange of goods. It might be that the whole deal comes from actually working with machines. So that's one of the things that makes it important, which also means the importance of IT checks is very important. As a seller, you need to know that your customer is who they say they are. As a customer, you know you're actually buying from a secure place, which is actually real, that the website that exists represents a real business behind that. And therefore, the construction idea of digital signatures, which are used to prove your environment, to prove that. So this is very important. How do you sign something digitally? How do you come bound to a contract using a digital signature? After this, of course, enters the payment phase. Now, the main issue with the payment phase is simple. If you're paying online, you're likely to do it by funds transfer or a credit card. It needs to be encrypted. Are you making sure that your accounts are safe if you're with the information you're handing over? You really don't want it to go to them. You want it to go to your bank, so your bank can authorize payment to them, so there is no way they get hold of the information. There's then a delivery phase. You need to make sure that having paid for the product, you get secure delivery, that the people who deliver it are trusted, that it actually arrives at you as it said. And again, you need to have integrity checks on the people who are delivering it. Are these people who are going to have some access to your house, access to your life? Are they acceptable in the way they behave, etc.? So I think it's very important that we look through these and understand the various phases and the various delivery points. Okay? So what risks are you actually trying to mitigate against? Well, primarily, one of the risks you're doing against is unauthorized data modification. We talked about integrity. We need to make sure that people cannot get in there and change your data to misrepresent you, or maybe to do something like that. You need to make sure that people cannot repudiate your contracts, to make sure that one or other of the two parties does not renege on the contract and agreement after the fact. This is much more difficult in an e-commerce situation. We may never have met people. You also have to make sure that it's authenticity. You can be looking at a website, it may be claiming to be one thing, but how can you be absolutely sure that it is that? And you also need to protect the confidentiality of that to make sure there is not unauthorized data disclosure, which is linked, of course, not quite the same, which is linked to the idea of privacy, to make sure the data is controlled and disclosure of the given, and that it is available to those who need it, but is not available to those who do not. That's a very important element of the e-commerce business world, doing that. And I'm going to take a very brief look at something here, which I think is something that you'll often see. If you search on the web for how to mitigate risk, you'll get something that we call personal protections. The idea that it's an individual's responsibility to mitigate the risks in which they're going into. And you'll have known all these quite commonly. You'll have seen that the warning to only use familiar websites. Don't buy off unfamiliar websites because you don't know where they've been, you don't know what those items like that. Look for the lock, which is a small symbol in the corner of a website where you're actually being asked to take a payment, which tells you that it's actually secure, it's encrypted, and the money that you're paying will definitely go to that, and the information that you're giving will only go to your bank, and so that to authorize money to be passed over, it's not going to be too much. The information is not going to be shared with your things. Equally, you're told don't overshare. Don't tell them everybody too much about yourselves. Okay, don't tell them everything about yourselves. It's important to the people to recognise that the more information they give, you can combine this with modification information to give a false opinion of yourself and to give identity theft. Make sure your passwords are strong. Check your statements regularly to make sure there's no money coming on. Use a good antivirus checker to inoculate your computer. Secure your Wi-Fi. Privatize it. Make sure that no one can step in and use it. Do that. Don't do your shopping in public. This is often you warned. Don't be aware of the fact it's not just that electronic hackers who might try to steal your information. Someone looking over your shoulder might steal your information while you're installing the kind of protection that will stop somebody stealing electronically. You'll end up having it stolen physically. Think mobile. The verb is that you can actually maybe better to use your mobile phone as a secure institution, keep it locked, keep it encrypted. And it might be better to use a payment method on your phone, which means that you do not have to get your card out and you can access it. Count your cards, make sure you know you still have them, make sure you know that actually how many cards you've used, make sure there isn't a card that's lying around somewhere. Some people actually forget about cards. And make sure that you check that the seller is reliable, and if there's a problem you complain loud and proud. Now, most of us will say actually there's nothing wrong with these all seem very sensible with that, but I think the argument we're having here is that actually if we're talking about e-commerce as a major business factor of the future, it shouldn't just come down with the idea of personal protection. No one today to a shop that basically if you go into a shop and get robbed, it's completely your fault because you've done all these things. But what actually matters is not personal protections. The world of e-commerce, we have to build an environment in which it is safe to do business. And for that, a number of organizations have to come in. Firstly, businesses themselves. They need to get involved and they need to set up things like that. And the credit card companies, the finance companies, etc., have been part of this, and that they've set up systems that allow you to make it easy to get your money back, make it to charge back, you need to get credit through that. They're trying to create the system. This is why it's worth saying that I didn't call this simply about security, so I called it taming the wilds. There's a wilderness out there which can be quite dangerous, and therefore we're trying to say how do we make that wilderness civilized and stop it going that. So we have the finance, we have credit checks. We have areas that businesses get together and they set up business bureaus that will oversee businesses. In Britain, that could be trading standards, it could be uh, business roundtables, there's a business roundtable in the States, there's responsible business bureaus. All these organisations you can report organisations to, and they will intervene on your behalf, even if you're not a resident in those countries, and they'll make sure that businesses obey the rules, etc. And also some of them will have representative institutions. These are things that businesses may join in order to get a guarantee. You have to see it with travel agencies and banks, etc., where because they are a member of institutions, where they have a say in the rules are set to make sure that people stay honest, you can actually get through, and these are representative institutions. So this is the businesses themselves trying to build a kind of sensible environment, taming the wilds. But also consumer content has a role. Consumer content across the e-commerce world, we are becoming very reliant on that information that is left by those who went before us. So people come here and they will look at it. You can go to it on Amazon, you can look at it on Google, you can look at it on any sort of feedback things, TripAdvisor, etc., things like that, where you can actually say how well a trip went, or you can talk about how well a business went, or how long well a shopping experience was, where you got fair treatment, etc. And all these are major issues going forward. So consumer contact plays a big role in the ideas of what we're actually talking about here. So I think it's very important to recognize that. And also, we talk about consumer content. It's also important not to ignore the fact government regulations have played a part. And the government regulations have come in there. So it's a trifecta. Three things working together: business, consumer, and the government overall regulating it, which is creating an environment in which it is possible to tame the wild and build a decent ongoing business.